back in Chicago. Thanks for joining us. Left of center this evening, we have Avis Lavelle, who I don't really consider too far left. Derek Addis also joins us, who is looking at himself on TV, which he should not do. Bruno Barron joins us on the right side, as well as Jennifer Nevins, who's a strong Trump supporter. You know, in that recent poll that Fox did of Democratic voters, they all agreed that that health care should be the issue. They like the idea of Medicare for all. But on some of the other issues, there was a considerable split. Insofar as the Green New Deal, only, and by the way, these are voters that, you know, they want someone that they can elect, not someone that necessarily is going to speak to their particular issues. But only 37% of those felt that the Green New Deal was a good idea. Only 31% thought that reparations was a good idea, and only 25% thought that abolishing ICE was a good idea. So that, to me, says that it's more of a moderate, at least these results that are in thus far. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Do you agree that health care is the issue to be discussed, Derek, if you want to get Democrats involved?
No, I believe so. I believe that gets to invoke healthcare into a political discussion gets everyone involved because everyone has an opinion on how it should be dealt with. But considerably talking about the Democrats, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a number of people who have problems with healthcare costs right now, the rising costs, or just sustainability of the healthcare system, and I think it's a really good issue.
Avis Lavelle?
I am old enough to have been around the first time that we tried to do this, and the devil is always in the details. Everybody wants health care reform, but how do you do that? Medicare for all, or Medicaid, whichever CAID or care you want to call it, it's going to come down to the details. It's got to do with having a public option, but it's also got to do with people feeling that they can keep their own doctors. It's got to do with how we're going to pay for it and how we're going to reform the whole payment structure, because it's just not that simple. The first Clinton-Gore campaign, everybody was on board for health care reform, but then we were nibbled to death by ducks when we got down to the details of what this was actually going to be and how you were going to pay for it.
Now, you worked, what you mentioned in the introduction in the last hour, you worked for the Bill Clinton campaign. You came out of the Little Rock operation, which made Bill Clinton the President of the United States. To what extent, and you were involved in the John Kerry campaign in the state of Illinois, how active were you for Hillary Clinton?
I did some phone banking. I did some work here on the ground, but I wasn't actively engaged.
Were there many people that were very active for Bill Clinton that were not very active for Hillary? Did she have her own group that she brought together?
Yeah, it was different. It was different.
And insofar as looking to 2020, Joe Biden, his pedigree really goes to Barack Obama. So are the Clintons, in your view, likely to have a big say or any say in this field of 15 or 20?
I don't feel like it will be as much of an impact as you might think. I do feel like there are people who are diehard Clintonites and people who have great affinity for the Clintons, and some of their views and some of their affinities for candidates will rub off on the people that they favor, for the people who support them like that. But I feel like people are going to be of the political era in which they're operating, and that was 1992. This is a different world. And so I don't feel like whatever affinities you had in 1992 are going to necessarily influence where you go to deal with today's problems in 2019.
Do you believe that the problems that the president had with Monica Lewinsky and sort of the womanizing aspect of Bill Clinton's life, has that made him somewhat of a pariah to some Democrats running this year, specifically to some of the women that are running?
I think to some extent, and I think what's interesting to me is that it's probably not as much about what he did back then as it is about the failure to be able to face up to it, to accept it, to say, I did wrong,
yeah.
I feel bad about it, because I think that would have bought him more support
right.
in today's world.
Right.
What's funny about, look, if we're looking out at what the Democrats are going to do or what direction they're going to go, they have a very simple choice. And they can go hard left identity politics. And if they do, I think it's reasonably certain that even if Trump has weaknesses, he's probably going to get reelected. And then the only problem they really have right now between Biden and Sanders, as being the two old white guys, is that those guys could make a mistake, or they might be viewed as too old, or it'll just be a one of those really tough low turnout elections. But as far as the Clintons are concerned, I mean, you've got the Clintons have their power is waning. The Obamas are still out there. They're still playing the game. They're involved in a lot of different things as far as organizing.
And they're not flexing it very much.
Well, how would we know? I mean, maybe they're not. Maybe they are. Maybe they're waiting.
Well, they have said they're not going to make an endorsement in the primary, which seems to me is somewhat of a slap to Joe Biden.
Perhaps, but it's also
He's not even in
Not
yet.
running. That's what I'm saying. Why are we so?
I'm
He's
not
not
sure he's
in.
not
I
running.
don't think he's running. Okay.
But he
No, I
hasn't
think
he's not running.
announced. He hasn't announced
not
it.
running.
I know that, but
I don't know that he's not, but I'm saying right now he's not. Yeah, we keep invoking him into the conversation.
Let me say about Joe Biden, and this hasn't come up yet, and I would be very blunt. Joe Biden is going to run up against the same Me Too problem that Bill Clinton would run up against. Anybody who
quite.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
maybe not quite, but listen, shades of it. Because anybody who is listening to my voice right now can Google for themselves Joe Biden with his hands on women. You will come up with at least 50 images of his hands all over young women, old women, children. This is what he does. And I'm telling you, sometimes, and they're not photoshopped images to my knowledge, sometimes the photos are just downright strange. And so I think that this is, in the Me Too era, unless that wanes very quickly, and maybe the Democrats will put that on the shelf should he be the nominee, which would be interesting, a study in hypocrisy. That is going to be something that he's going to have to deal with. The creepy Uncle Joe. Sorry, but it's out there, guys. So
Are Biden and Beto and Bernie Sanders, are they getting a media push because they're white men? And is being a white man in the current Democratic Party, that's an albatross around their neck?
it's weird because the polls that you show don't indicate that.
They do not.
So I think that maybe if the media gets a hold of that and really gets smart, I should say, and I say that as a Trump supporter, right? But if they look at that and they get woke to the idea that maybe you don't have to be in a certain demographic to get votes, they might help be boosters. But right now, as it exists, I think that the momentum is on the side of women.
I think that for the media, because of the creature that the media is, it's about a horse race.
Yes.
They've got to have a horse race. They've got to make it be competitive so that people are paying attention to it. I don't know that there's as much of a fervor out here for the horse race as the media always makes it seem like, because that is where, I mean, we go to poll after poll after poll, and it's like, which horse is in front?
Is Beto their I agree with you, but is Beto the ideal person to have out there for the media? Isn't he the best story that's out there?
He's a fresh flavor of right now,
Right.
the month, yeah.
Yeah. I want to come back and talk about that. We've also got a full board of lights. We'll bring our folks in from coast to coast and border to border, wherever you are listening this evening. Thanks for taking some time away from the basketball tourney to join us tonight on Beyond the Beltway. Bruce DuMont back in Chicago, again looking at the Fox polls. Even though the Democrats said that electability is important to 51% of those polled, 84% in the poll were either for Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, who would be certainly far left of center. So 84% at the moment of that Democratic Party is looking for somebody that is, at least collectively, that's a lot more people than the 47% that at the moment are for Uncle Joe. We got lots of callers on the line. Let's head to one of the most beautiful states in the U.S., Idaho, Meridian, Idaho. Bob is listening to us on KBOI. Go ahead, Bob. Hello? Bob, are you there? Well, I said that nice thing about Idaho, and Bob's not there. Nashville, Tennessee is a good place. Rick, are you there online too? Okay. Is there anybody, put anybody on the air and just let's see who they are. Who's next?
This is Mark in Monterey, California.
Mark in Monterey, California, also a beautiful place in this country. I served not far from there at Fort Ord many years ago. I protected the United States from the street communists of the 60s. Go ahead.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
Hey, Bruce, before I make my point, let me share a little shop talk with you. I noticed that on hold that I can't hear the program very well at all. It's way down, like maybe minus 30 dB. So you
Okay.
might have your chief technician check the on-hold audio.
I'm going to have our technician check that and also find out why we lost the last two calls. But we'll check on
Okay.
that. Maybe they can't hear the show, so they think
they
that
hung up.
we're not listening to
Yeah.
them. So we'll look into that.
Yeah, that
We'll-
could be.
Very good.
Could be. So here was my point. When you were given the poll numbers last hour, and Trump was behind most of the people, with the exception of Elizabeth Warren. I think the one positive for Donald Trump.
No.
Is
He was behind Bernie and he was behind Biden. So he was behind the two men. He was ahead of the two women that I referenced, who were in the top four. There wasn't
think-
one against Beto O'Rourke.
Okay. I think one of the positives for him is we know all his negatives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
And the other candidates, we don't know enough about them, the bad news about them. So, once we learn more about Bernie Sanders and Beto and Joe Biden, you could see those numbers drop.
how about Kamala Harris and her longtime friendship with Willie Brown? I don't think that's a national issue or awareness at the moment. It is in California.
Yeah, I don't. It might be, but that's not going to hurt her in California. But that may affect how people feel about
But
her
in Iowa.
around the country. Yeah, Iowa, Idaho. Bernie Sanders.
Nothing hurts a
there's some
Democrat in
audio
San
out there.
Francisco, by the way.
Yeah.
Nothing would hurt a Democrat. Go ahead.
Bruce, there is some audio out there on YouTube of Bernie Sanders from years ago in an interview, I think it was on public radio, where he was saying that he thought bread lines were not a bad idea. Now, if he becomes a serious candidate and the Republicans put that into an ad, he's cooked.
To
he's
some extent, although I think that what people say and what they do 20 or 30 years later, I think is probably less and less important, at least in a presidential election. Maybe it's something that's important in a Supreme Court fight, but in a presidential election, I don't know whether it makes a lot of sense or not.
Well, I know that Mitt Romney was not helped by allegations of him being a bully when he was in prep school.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, the point is, whoever the presidential, your basic point is well taken. We know there's a lot of dirt out there on Donald Trump. The American people know it, and at least 62 million people looked the other way and voted for him. Some of them may have held their nose and did it, but he's got a base of maybe 60 plus million. Whereas you're right, there's a whole list of Democrats that we don't know much about. And we will soon. We will know a lot. We will know about them. And by the way, one of the things that I think is a good idea, and I know that I don't throw a lot of bouquets to CNN very often, but I do like the idea that they're giving 1 hour to introduce virtually all of the Democratic candidates to a national audience. Some I think have done very well, and certainly insofar as getting to know them as people, I think that that helps people make their decisions, and it gives an opportunity to sort of the lesser known candidates to be seen. Avis has got a comment.
I disagree that we know all of Donald Trump's negatives.
Okay.
Because I really feel like with that feud of 16 and Republican candidates, and I don't think that people took Donald Trump seriously as a candidate early on. There were a lot of people who probably dismissed out of hand. I don't think that they did all of the research that they could have done and should have done in terms of opposition research. I think that there are a lot of things that may come out in the next year or two as a result of where some of these threads have started to unravel. We never saw his tax returns. We don't know what business dealings there are that people would find untoward or that may have underlying tax problems. So I think that as a negative. We know the negatives from the behavior that we've seen as a result of who he's been the last 2 years as president. But I don't think that he was thoroughly vetted by either the Republican opponents or by the Democrats.
Do you agree with that, Jennifer?
No, I don't agree with it at all. I mean, this man has just completed a huge exam by 40 FBI agents, 19 attorneys, so on and so forth. The unknowns that exist out there, whether there were some business dealings, whether there was a sexual escapade, whether there were all these things, we've already kind of had some of those already. We had a tape with Access Hollywood. There have been things that the public has kind of dealt with already. So we know, what if there were 5 other affairs? What if there was something going on?
What about the Southern District of New York
Yeah.
that may have criminal activity by him or
Right.
by members
The
of his
Southern District of New York, headed up by someone who is a rabid Clintonite. We all can see, again, kind of what's going around today, the
But
discussion
appointed by
of
the president, right?
But the discussion, though, today, and I hope it centers on this, is politically motivated takedowns. So if we look at what's going on in New York, many people, especially in light of what happened today, are going to look at that and size it up as a politically motivated takedown.
But the facts will be what the facts are.
Yeah, they will. But I think I'll back up Jennifer on this point. It's like, whatever else comes out, let's say something new comes out, people are going to look at that and go, is that all it is, or is that all you got? I mean, this guy, look, it's not that people don't care so much whether Trump did X or Trump did Y or whether something new comes out. It's that his character or his lack of character or whatever you want to call it, it's known. It's out there. And I mean, he's the guy who said in late 2015, early 2016, I could shoot somebody on Times Square or whatever, Rockefeller Center, and it's not going to change my base. I think he's proven that to be true. Right or wrong,
But
he's got 43 to 45% of the people, and that's not going to change.
By the way, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York would have been appointed by President Trump, not by President Clinton. So if he's a Clinton,
Oh, well,
I mean,
It doesn't.
all U.S.
The whole-
Jennifer, all U.S. attorneys are appointed by the President of the United States. So if there is a Republican out there, and he's the Attorney General, or he's the Assistant U.S. Attorney, or the U.S. Attorney, he was appointed by Donald Trump and this Justice Department.
but what we have
So if
seen, though,
someone within the Justice Department can look beyond someone who appointed them and say, I think this person has done something wrong, then I think perhaps he should be congratulated for his or her integrity, not suggesting that they were appointed by the wrong
I would
person.
only suggest that his team, if you look at the team members and his people, like I have, that are backing him up, that were in place in that office, in that organization, they are not friendly to Republicans.
Okay,
So.
again, I don't know the politics of the U.S. Attorney for Boston, but when the U.S. Attorney for Boston opens a can of worms with his investigation into college admission testing, and he comes up with 2 members of the Hollywood elite who are now treated as pariahs within the world because of the parenting they did, is that a good thing or bad thing? Is Donald Trump uncovering something? I'm going to ask you this, Derek. By that U.S. Attorney doing what he's doing, the targets are Hollywood elites. Is that a good idea? The Hollywood elites are not for Donald Trump, but the Hollywood elites are being held up for doing something very bad that the average person can relate to.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this goes into something that I noticed at a very early age. We talked about the partisan politics of our Supreme Court justices, which are the pinnacle of our judicial system. And as I saw that emanate down into all the lower courts, all the way down to local municipalities, it troubles me. And even to this day, we're sitting here talking about the political leanings of the people who are supposed to be the most impartial, and the only way that this ship stays running is with that check and balance of the judicial system. So I don't care who was wrong, whether political elite or public figure, celebrity elite, or whoever. If there was some wrongdoing that was done and it's a punishable offense, then those people should be punished for those actions.
Does everybody agree with that?
Sure, why not?
Absolutely.
I'm kind of interested. It's a little curious to me how much traction this admissions scandal's gotten. I mean, because it really took off. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen and they don't take off as much as the admissions. I think maybe it's a kind of a zeitgeist, kind of a reflection of our culture, this idea that there's privileged people and then there's the non-privileged, and we have privileged people. And I'm not saying it's right at all that the privileged people would do this, but it feeds into that narrative that there's some people that can do things and other people that can't, the class warfare. I think that's part of it.
It's very illustrative of the difference, the stark difference between the haves and the have-nots. The children of the haves have always paid their way into colleges. It might have been paying money toward the endowment or whatever. But this is taking it to a new low, and it strikes at all the opportunities that have been taken from others who worked their way through.
This is an issue that if you have a brilliant strategist, you can get to the nerves of maybe some people that normally wouldn't vote for you because of what you've just discussed. There's a class warfare thing here. And Donald Trump, even though he's a billionaire, usually... Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Thanks very much for joining us. Bruno, you were making a point during the break about the admission scandal.
The admission scandal is not left versus right or rich versus poor. The admission scandal is, and I think you're absolutely right that this does play right into Trump's strong suit, assuming he can find a brilliant strategist, which is hard in the GOP for a wide variety of reasons.
That's
but
true.
The fact is that this is elites versus everybody else, and the elite make up there's elites who are left and right, and some of them are crony capitalists, some of them are limousine liberals, some of them are the administrative class that has actually run roughshod over this country over the last few years. So there's a lot to be had there, but this is just higher education in America, and I'll say this for everyone to hear me, is a corrupt scam. And the education that takes place in higher education is an afterthought. It has become a playground for administrators to take the best higher education system in the world and turn it into a way to suck money from future earners into their pockets through student loans, all of it should be zeroed out.
Right. Absolutely, I agree with that.
Avis, do you see it that dire?
I don't know if I see it that dire, but I do feel like when you look at this whole scandal, it is in a lot of ways a phony scandal because, as I said to you, the elite have always found a way to get their kids into college through manipulating the system. People take great offense at what has been discovered about this because it's pulling back the covers. But it speaks a lot to the value system at all of these institutions. You know, I question sometimes, what is the difference between what they're teaching at these other institutions that one should cost $110,000 a year and another is a $10,000 a year education there. They're teaching the same classes, and yes, there's
It's
probably
about their
some
pedigree,
difference.
though, right?
It's about,
They-
but
they
it's
have a
all
higher degree
credentialism.
pedigrees?
It's credentialism.
Yeah.
It is credentialism, and that is the pedigree is what gets you in the door, whether you learned anything or not. We know by experience and by exposure there are a lot of people who have the pedigrees who aren't well educated, who aren't smart. You say to yourself, how did this person get through?
Are there any of the, does anybody feel sorry for some of the students? Not all, but some of the students. Are there some students out there that maybe didn't know what their parents were doing?
Oh, I'm sure,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I don't think that you could prove that every student knew what their parents were up to. And a student, for example, who is a beneficiary of a legacy, I'm not going to blame that student because their parent put $500,000 down on, bleachers for the gym. I mean, there's some cases, I don't know in the case of Lori Laughlin's daughters how much they knew. I mean, they seem like airheads. Frankly, they didn't even want to be in school. So what can you say about that? But I think that some students, you're dealing with an 18, 19-year-old. A lot of them are just kind of, I think, at the mercy of what their parents want to do. So I think this really needs to be ascribed to not just the parents, but it takes a willing administrator and somebody, the Berkeley, California exec who has a yacht and the kids are out on it. The system is really broken.
Well, I think the saddest thing about the kids in this case, I'm remembering the one quote from one of the parents who was on the phone. He was wiretapped, and he said, "I don't really see a moral problem with any of this." So what you have here is, and let's say that these 30 parents that were indicted, or however number it was. Let's say they represent a slice of the upper middle class parent class. Let's say they represent maybe 15 or 20% of those kinds of parents. If you want to know what the problem that's going on with America these days is that you have an entire strata of very, very rich people, elite, make a lot of money. They have less morals than a poor hobo hopping rail cars. I mean, they're just bad people. And these poor girls, you know, their girl who was this parent, her dad's a scumbag. He's an amoral piece of crap, and she had to be raised by him. Look what that's doing to our society.
I want to talk about looking ahead to 2020, and I asked this a couple of weeks ago when Mike Miller was there, and I want to ask everybody. We'll start with you, Derek. There are all kinds of statistics that are out now suggesting that millennials are more susceptible to accepting socialism. And so my question to you is, would you like to, and you want Bernie Sanders to be the standard bearer of the Democratic Party, would you like to see 2020 to be a campaign by, for, and about the future of the country, weighing socialism against capitalism, a full-blown debate at all levels of presidential politics?
Yes, so I guess I'm not against the idea of capitalism, and it's brought a lot of great things to the world. Unfettered capitalism is a different story. And so let's take it back to when we're children. We were taught that sharing is the best way to communicate with others and to find harmony amongst the masses. Yet as adults, when we talk about sharing, we're like, that's socialism, that's not okay. We can't take from these to give to these, like that. And so I'm like, where along the way is that lost? So yes, for 2020, I would like us to get back to an element of sharing being the forefront of our conversations. And it's not saying that that one part is not allowed to have. It's just that how much of this total pie should you have?
Avis Lavelle, would you like to see the Democratic campaign of 2020 be an open debate on this subject? Because it appears, at least with the principles that are already running, that it may emerge and that may become an issue. Is that good for the country?
I think it's the labeling that is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is capitalism, this is bad.
Mm-hmm.
This is socialism, this is bad. I think that there is a lot more fluidity in people's ideas if they're not caught up in the labels of it. I think there
But
is.
Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist. He's proud of that label.
Not a socialist, a democratic socialist.
That's what I said. He's a democratic
you're right.
socialist.
There's a difference.
And
Yeah.
you know, Elizabeth Warren is pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just saying is, with a good knockdown debate at all levels. I mean, people running for Congress, people running for the Senate. Jennifer, would you like to see that sort of really open,
I would.
robust discussion?
You know what, I really would. But here's the problem with that from my perspective as someone who is an unrepentant capitalist who believes that a lot of sharing has occurred with capitalists who have money, who share their money. This doesn't need to be dictated from on high, okay? But I would love to have that debate. The problem when you're coming to the Republican Party from my side of the aisle is they seem very incapable of having this debate. We haven't had anybody since Reagan. I think Trump can approach it. But as far as the House leaders and the senators and everybody else, they aren't engaging, hey, here are the problems of socialism from our perspective. They're really rotten at messaging. And it's a target-rich environment. We have Venezuela, we have Finland. Their healthcare system is on the complete collapse. We have things going on, and if we have an able messenger, they could say, here, this is what's going on. Let us not just say, oh, Finland, Venezuela, but actually explain things. But unfortunately, we have a dearth of intelligence on my side of the aisle lately.
Bruno.
First of all, I agree with Avis that if we all step back from the rhetoric and had a decent conversation about this, maybe we could find some middle ground inside a robust political debate. Here's my take on the situation, and that's this. Obviously, politically, there's a debate between socialism and capitalism, but the fact of the matter is that one is completely subservient to the other. That you cannot, Sweden and Denmark and Finland, those are capitalist countries. Those are highly, highly successful capitalist countries that have decided to do a different mix of social programs than the United States, and we're a little bit harder over here. And maybe that's the right thing, maybe that's the wrong thing, and let's have an election, let's have a debate. But the fact is that before you can redistribute a dime of wealth, that wealth has to be created.
You gotta
And
have it.
socialism doesn't create wealth.
Right.
There's a border, there's a line with which you can go. You can say that, well, Denmark still creates wealth, and Germany still creates wealth, and Germany's more capitalistic than Denmark, and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, if you cross that divide between no longer really capitalism and over to socialism, you stop creating wealth. Everyone gets poorer, everyone gets dumber, everyone has less stuff, and capitalism produces wealth, which is why, since the fall of the Soviet Union, the number of people that have come out of poverty worldwide is solely because the world became aggressively more capitalist. So
Sure.
let's have a debate on
Yeah,
how
no.
we redistribute it.
Answer
No,
that.
But let's
Yeah.
not kill the goose that laid the golden
Yeah,
eggs.
no, and that's fine. And again, we're not talking about dismantling capitalism, but we are talking about corporations and people that have enormous amounts of wealth finally paying their fair share. And I think that you can call that what you want, but the reality is that, the reality is that Amazon paid 0 in taxes last year, one of the most profitable company in the world. Like, how is that okay? And they operate here, but they do their taxes offshore, so they don't have to pay anything. And what they do onshore, both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican, they're all in the same group that make these laws that benefit corporations. And so all we're saying is it's time for them to, and if they paid their fair share, and if corporations paid their fair share, then we would have enough money to do socialized health care and expand Medicaid. And
Bruno wants to
Okay,
follow up.
so somewhere in there, I lost the point that you were saying, but I just want to reiterate this point, is that, first of all, let's take a real simple example. The Green New Deal was a trial balloon that was shot across the bow of the world. There's I don't know who did it. I don't know. It was more than just AOC coming up with something she posted on her website. That was a trial balloon. There is nothing in the Green New Deal that is remotely, let's let capitalism produce some wealth so we can redistribute it. Everything about the Green New Deal underneath the surface was 100% totalitarian. You can't have planes.
No,
you
stop,
can't
stop,
have gasoline
stop
anymore.
right there. You
No,
didn't-
we're gonna
no.
get rid
No,
of
dude,
we're gonna
come
get
on.
rid of cars. I mean,
No,
look,
they didn't
those
say that.
were in
No,
the
they did
trial.
not say
yes,
that.
they were.
Hold
I
on.
read it.
Look, first of all, I really feel a little disrespect that you weren't listening to me as I was talking a minute ago.
I was.
But I appreciate your honesty. What I would say about the airplanes, they weren't saying taking away airplanes. What they're saying is investing in high-speed rail, which is a far more efficient mode of transportation.
Not in the US.
And what they were saying, well, how do we know? We
Well,
built
we've
the
already
hold
had
on.
the boondoggles
California's
in
attempt.
California.
We built the national highway system, and at the time they said that couldn't be done, right? There was 2 dudes named Lewis and Clark who decided to go map the whole United States a long time. They said that couldn't be
You're
done.
But
and
there
they
was-
very
moved
good at
from coast to coast.
misdirection. You're-
That was
No,
that
that is
was
the
a lot
reality
of
of
private
these things.
investor. There was a
Jennifer.
lot of private investments in the highway system. They set a deadline for this in the Green New Deal. Okay, it was a 10 to 12-year long period, and then when Mitch McConnell wants to put it to a vote because it's out there, they champion this. AOC comes out and says, takes offense at it and says it's a stunt to vote on legislation that you made a press conference over.
Back shortly in Chicago. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks for joining us. I did.
He
Bruce
doubles
DuMont.
down, though.
Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. By the way, I think most people know that we do this program from the Museum of Broadcast Communications. The current exhibit that we have here is Saturday Night Live, the whole 40-plus history of Saturday Night Live. It's here for one more week. It closes on the 31st of March. It will be closed the next time we get together. Next Sunday night it'll be closed. So if you've not come down to see it, come down and see it at the corner of Estate and Kinsey. Let's go to Roger, listening to us in Austin, Texas, on KLBJ. Go ahead, Roger.
Good evening, Bruce. Good to be on your show again.
Great. Nice to have you with us.
Yeah, on this discussion of socialism, I believe someone had a factoid about the amount of support, particularly within the younger millennial type segment.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these people, they haven't paid taxes, and folks like Bernie Sanders are like the Pied Piper running around saying, oh, well, we'll just shake down the rich, and that's going to provide all these great things that socialism is going to offer you. But the problem is the math does not work, and when this support group finds that they're going to have to pay a lot for this thing, the support's going to crater. We've got a $22 trillion debt. We've got unrepairable deficits, apparently. We have Social Security on a trajectory to going insolvent, Medicare, Medicaid, and they talk about Medicare for all. but they never mention that the people that are in Medicare have paid into Medicare most of their working lives, and they also pay a premium every month. It is not a free single-payer
Right.
health care system. And, all of these promises that are being made and this Green New Deal, if anyone has actually read this resolution, is completely absurd. And leading the charge of absurdity is the fact that there is no proof, not one shred of evidence that shows that the things they want to do in the Green New Deal will have any effect on climate change, much less all the societal re-engineering that they're trying to do.
All right,
in this
Roger, stop
document.
for a second. I want to ask fellow Texan, Derek Addis, who joins us tonight from the Brownsville area. What do you think of what Roger just had to say?
Yeah, I think it's awfully presumptuous for you to assume that none of these people paid any taxes, like the people that are going to be voting. I, for one, have been working since I was right up to 16 years old. So I've been paying taxes since I was 16. I'm 32 now. So my entire life I've paid in, and I'm one of those Bernie Sanders voters and supporters. And at the rally that I went to, it looked like the majority of the people there were of voting age as well. And it would also be presumptuous for me to say that they are all taxpayers, but I wouldn't say the opposite. Look, I'm not a champion of the Green New Deal, but I am a champion of lofty ideas, because the only way that things change in the world is with this crazy idea that everyone says is not going to happen. So if the idea to battle climate change or to change the way that we move humans around the world comes from the Green New Deal, I don't care if it comes from the Green New Deal or a napkin written at lunch with your best friend. I think that it's wrong for us to say that we can't have these ideas, that like it's so crazy, the Green New Deal, it could never happen. Well, how about we talk about what from that can actually happen, and let's like try to meet in the middle.
Is there any aspect of the Green New Deal, and I realize there's a lot of
there's
bullet
a lot
points
on there.
on it.
Yeah.
Is there any one of those that you really believe in? That it's a tenet of the Green New Deal, and you'd say, yeah, if we did this, this actually would help, and how would it help?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm not 100% well versed on it, but something kind of what we were talking about earlier. I would like to change the way the transportation system in the United States works, and we're not trying to eliminate planes. We're just saying there's probably a better way to move people around, and Europe has shown us that with their high-speed rail.
Well, those are manifestations of mechanisms that can be used to implement the New Deal, and they're going to be non-starters, I can promise you, my friend. But if you do read the resolution, you'll find that there is a tremendous amount of social engineering in this document, and there's no way to pay for these things. And you want a transportation revolution, it's coming, sir. It is coming in the form of autonomous automobiles with 5G coordination. These are things that are happening now, and all of these archaic mass transit, public transit, high-capacity transit systems will be dinosaurs very soon when we have the high-level artificial intelligence-based coordination of autonomous vehicles running on 5G coordinated systems in our cities. That other stuff, they're not on demand, door-to-door step. They are fixed destination, fixed schedule. They're inconvenient, and people will not select them when they have an option like today with Uber, where they can get in, a vehicle. It takes them right to where they want to go at the time that they want to do that. They're not hiking to a bus stop and waiting on something that's going to take them 5 miles from where they want to be. Those systems are expensive and they don't work well.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on autonomous vehicles in an Uber style for like maybe Chicago, but there's no way that, well, I assume, probably wrong to presume, but that no one is going to want to take an Uber from New York to LA, but they probably would want to take a high-speed rail.
Well, they're taking airplanes now, and they're
right. And
airplanes.
Look at what flying is like now. Does anyone actually love to fly now? And they've crammed us all into these planes. It's not.
I actually like to fly.
They're going to cram you into a train.
Yeah, I don't know.
What's the
Jennifer's
difference?
got a comment.
A couple
Roger.
comments. I think that we're coming up against a cultural difference, because in Europe, the countries are right next to each other. Your workplace is usually right by your house. Most people don't drive automobiles. Most people live in apartments. This is America. To make a cultural shift like that is going to be far more difficult task than what they're making it out to be.
Roger, thank you very much for listening this evening. I want to thank Avis Lavelle and Derek Addis. our Democrats, leaning Democrats this evening, and also our Republicans or Libertarians, Bruno Barron and Jennifer Nevins, for being with us as part of our broadcast this evening. I want to thank Sam Greenberg, I want to thank Fritz Goldman, and I want to thank Aaron Johnson, a new member of our team, for being with us tonight. I'm Bruce DuMont. Good night from Chicago.